Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. McNallie Money, the official home of power mining analysis. Another fantastic day in the market for the Bitcoin mining stocks. We're going to be discussing that in today's video, along with a deep dive into who we believe may be getting the next deal or hyperscaler co-location contract in the sector. In addition to that, we just received some great news out of Hive Digital Technologies. A lot to talk about. Before we get into it, take a second, smash the like button, guys. Big help to myself and the channel. Anthony loves it. If you're not already subscribed, McNallie Money, feel free to join. And let us know in the comment section below which of these stocks in today's video you think will be next to land a hyperscaler co-location contract. With that being said, let's get into today's video. Okie doke, guys, away we go. Wednesday afternoon, another remarkable day in the Bitcoin mining space. This is going to be a really interesting episode. Some huge news came out last night in relation to Stargate, the HPC AI initiative. We're going to be talking about that first up and then attempting to answer the question, who's next in terms of the Texas-based miners to land one of these hyperscaler or co-location contracts? In addition to that, some very exciting news out from Hive as well. So, Anthony, I know you've been having a pretty good week in the markets there. It looks like you went out, got yourself a fresh haircut for the podcast today. How are you feeling over the last couple of days in the Bitcoin mining space?
Yeah, it's been a good week so far. Even though the Bitcoin price hasn't gone in the direction we hoped it had got, it is sort of leveling out, and but the miners have been doing really well. So I think people who've been following the channel for the last couple of years and taken note of some of the stocks that we highlight on a regular basis should be pretty pleased with if they've looked at that and done some due diligence and purchased some of those stocks, because I know from our portfolios things have been looking really good lately.
Yeah, most definitely. It's been an exciting time in the sector. We expect this to continue. We'll talk about that next up. But before we do, Hive Digital Technologies, they put out another update today, continuing on that aggressive growth plan that we've been covering really throughout the year here, targeting 25 exahash by US Thanksgiving, and it's looking very probable at this pace.
Yeah, it certainly is. Thanksgiving's only probably a couple of months away, but the company have now stopped doing 1 exahash updates, and today they decided to tell us about a 2 exahash update. So they're now at 20 exahash. They've surpassed that, and effectively, if you look at the global hash rate, that really accounts for approximately 2% of the whole network. Now, the milestone follows the expansion of the hydro-powered Phase 3 facility in Paraguay, and that's boosting their daily output now to 9 Bitcoin a day. The other positive news is the efficiency, because they're introducing more new miners into Paraguay. The efficiency now is at 18 joules a terahash, and that gives them a 55% mining margin. And if you look at the rate of growth this year, I mean, we're talking 233% year to date. Now, we were saying about CleanSpark and IREN achieving somewhere along those lines in previous years. Well, Hive have done it this year, and they've still got to get another 5 exahash in the next 2 months. So, once they achieve that target by Thanksgiving, that should get their production to 12 Bitcoin a day as a minimum expected. Bear in mind, obviously, taking all things into account in terms of difficulty, Bitcoin price, etc.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and that's why I like covering such a variety of sized companies on the channel. Everything from companies sub $100 million market cap, IREN's now plus 13 billion, and everything in the middle. You really get a good opportunity to find some of these growth stories early, and that's exactly what we're witnessing here with Hive. Now, speaking of growth, a major announcement last night. OpenAI, Oracle, SoftBank have now expanded the Stargate initiative. They've announced 5 new data centers. 3 of them have already been named in terms of the location. Now, if you recall, they've made a commitment to invest $500 billion, which equates to around 10 gigawatts worth of data center capacity by the end of 2025. This firmly puts them on schedule to doing so. And it's really got a lot of the analysts on the X community buzzing in terms of who could be next to sign one of these large hyperscaler deals.
Yeah, absolutely. And the three new sites are located in Shackleford County, Texas, Dona Anana County, New Mexico, and a further site in the Midwest. And combined with an additional expansion of 600 megawatts near the flagship Stargate site in Abilene, Texas. So Texas is really, got a lot of focus on at the moment, and we've actually got a map to show you some of the sites on there which have been provided, and you can see, clearly from where the Oracle location is there, where some of these sites are, and some of the mining sites are, Bryce.
Yeah, so if you take a look at this chart, the red dot is essentially the location of the current Stargate site in Albany, Texas, as you just alluded to. But you can see many of the miners we cover on the channel, the proximity of these locations. So you look at Childress, you look at Sweetwater, those are both in blue there, of course, owned by IREN. If you look at Cipher, they've got Barbara Lake. A little bit further out, they've got Odessa, Black Pearl. So people are really starting to speculate based on the proximity to this Stargate initiative, which could be the next Bitcoin miner or data center company to land one of these hyperscaler contracts. Now, they haven't announced the final 2 data center sites within this 5-site proposal. However, it has got a lot of people thinking, and that's really the genesis for this podcast, Anthony, trying to answer the question, who could be next in line essentially for one of these deals?
Yeah, absolutely. And we've covered, many of the miners that are transitioning their power towards HPC. We talk about the likes of IREN, Cipher, Bitfarms, Soluna Holdings, one of the smaller ones there, Riot Platforms. Many of these companies actually have sites in Texas. So the focus of today is to really give you an idea of what these companies are, where their sites are, and give you some more indication of what might happen when the announcement for these final 2 occurs.
Now, one of the interesting points within the article put out last night in relation to Stargate, they actually went through over 300 proposals. 30 different states put forward proposals to have these data centers located within their state. Now, as you just mentioned, Texas, New Mexico, and Midwest were the recipients of the first 3 contracts here, but this gives you a good, gauge as to the amount of interest and attention in this space. Now, again, on both sides of the coin here, you talk about competition, obviously a lot of competition, 300 names in the hat, only 5 to be selected. On the other end of the coin, we've already seen companies like TeraWulf, Core Scientific announcing deals with hyperscalers, essentially showing or proving that these Bitcoin miners are really the cream of the crop within this basket.
Yes, and we've actually got a plan to visit some of the sites in November to get some first-hand podcasts down there. We've been fortunate to visit 2 sites last year in Texas. One was the Core Scientific flagship site at Denton, which has now been converted and refurbished into CoreWeave's largest site in that contract with Core Scientific. And we've also been to the Corsicana site, which is Riot Platforms flagship site. And, that's got, 400 megawatts of mining, active self-mining at the moment, but another sizable 600 megawatts to support a HPC co-location deal.
Yeah, they certainly do. So if we now take a look at the Bitcoin miners themselves in terms of daily performance, it's no wonder the market has taken note. When you're talking about a $500 billion investment by year end, naming multiple new partners, really a rising tide does lift all ships. If we bring up the current view of the Bitcoin miners here, you can see many of the names, specifically with those operations in Texas, absolutely flying today. Soluna, IREN, Riot, Cipher. These have been up day after day for the last few weeks, but really this news last night has catapulted them into a new trajectory here.
Yeah, and there must have been some speculation at market close last night because Cipher share nearly hit $17. I think it sort of like in after hours it went as high as $16.96. It's pulled back a little bit today, but just to show you that there's a lot of interest in Cipher. IREN's having a great day, 14% up. I mean, that's just a behemoth of a company, 13 billion market capital now. Soluna Holdings is still having that volatility there. 15 million shares traded today, and we're only a couple of hours into trading. Riot Platforms, also another share that nearly hit $20 today. In fact, it did. If you look at the day range for Riot, it was over $20 at market open there. Literally, there was a 10-minute period when the market opened, and many of these shares were hitting those highs in that sort of 10 minutes. And after that 10 minutes, it started to sort of like come back down. But I think there's still a lot of optimism out there. That's why we're still seeing, an awesome amount of green on the table there. In terms of Core Scientific, that's pretty flat at the moment there. Only a couple of million shares traded. But as we've discussed many times with Core Scientific, I'm not sure the shareholders are going to accept the current deal. So maybe we see Core, we've come back to the table with a little bit more, or we see Core Scientific continue that contract for the next 22 years with all the extra additions in place there, earning sizable revenues year on year.
Very interesting observation there. We talked yesterday about the fact that Cipher's market cap was getting close to surpassing Core Scientific. Keep in mind, Core Scientific already has the contract. We've heard many of the CEOs saying the value of these megawatts is actually appreciating over time as more and more megawatts are taken off the market. So interesting to see many of the companies that don't yet have a deal being valued or given the uplift compared to some of those that already do. Now, we're not the only ones who have taken note of this sector. Price target upgrades have been issued across the board from many of the big banks. You can see a REIT has now put out targets on all three of these Texas hyperscaler miners, talking Riot, Cipher, and IREN. What are your thoughts on these numbers?
Analysts will put out numbers on a regular basis, and they'll have methods for doing this. Usually it's a case of looking at forward-looking EBITDA multiples, and they'll basically break down the businesses into its elements and give a valuation for each part of the business. Now, what we have seen in this last few weeks, with all the updates that IREN have been producing in terms of, effectively, if you go back to the podcast we had with Dan the day after earnings, and he very much articulated the fact that yes, they want a co-location deal, but they weren't going to give it at any price. They didn't want to give away value to a co-location partner, and they're more than prepared to do this business on their own. And just to sort of like to formalize that, they started to increase the number of GPUs and purchased another 12,000 GPUs to go into their Prince George site in Canada. Just to prove the point that they can deliver this. And so now they've got the best part, 24,000 GPUs going online. That will deliver significant amount of annualized revenue from next year when they're all installed and working. And from what Dan says and the team say there, they're already getting customers for those machines that aren't even plugged in yet. So they're very, very conscious that they can pull this off there. Now, obviously, they've got some enormous sites in Texas. Maybe they probably do want a co-location deal for those. But, one thing that you've noticed with IREN is the market capitalization has increased so much that it gives them some additional levers to pull in terms of raising capital very, very cheaply. If you go back to April when the share price was literally just over $5, there wasn't that many levers then, but when the share price is heading towards $50, believe you me, there's a few more levers they can pull, and they can start paying for additional refurbishments, additional GPUs. They've just spent 674 million buying those GPUs, and we talked yesterday about the likes of CleanSpark coming into the space with $100 million of Bitcoin-backed loan through Coinbase. IREN have scaled so much now that they can sort of literally raise capital on their own and deliver significant inroads into this HPC strategy that they're doing. But as I say, you're going to get a lot of analysts giving out their own sort of thought process on where they see the company, in the future. Those ratings there, we talked about them before. Maybe the multiple's not so high on Bitcoin mining because of the erratic volatility of the Bitcoin price, but very, very much more predictable with regards to HPC, because with HPC you have a lot more knowns. You know how much you're going to achieve in revenues from a co-location deal because that's contracted. Even if you're running your own services, you know at certain levels of uptime how much revenues you're going to get. You tend to understand the power costs of delivering that service as well. So with that predictability, you find that the HPC services get far more greater multiples. I've sat with some of these analysts before. We'll come on to the one with by Roth in a minute on IREN, but I can explain that, when I spoke to Daniel, he explained, for Bitcoin mining, tend to look at maybe 3 to 4 times multiples, but with regards to HPC, that could be anything between 15, 20 times multiples. And that's why you're seeing these really, really big price targets now, especially for IREN, as they're starting to deliver significant HPC without a partner.
You're certainly right about that. And if we do come on to the Roth post here, you can see Roth has upgraded the target on IREN to $82. Bernstein also came out. What's interesting about this table to me is how frequently or how quickly these targets have been revised upwards. You can essentially see every press release, every tranche of GPUs that IREN has purchased is forcing these analysts to increase the target. And I'll say it again, Anthony, Bitcoin has not even moved. We're just sitting above 113,000. We're nearly 12,000 off the all-time highs. And these companies are surging upwards of $50, $100 a share in some cases in terms of the price target for these Bitcoin mining stocks.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you show that slide there with the Roth there at $82, and you go down 3 lines there to Bernstein. Literally on the 15th of September, they gave a target of $20. Now, we were in New York that week when the share price was closer to $30. And so I do have a bit of a head scratch at some of these targets there. We've actually done a podcast before, Bryce, on how we would value certain aspects of the miners. I think we even used IREN as the example to show how we would put a valuation together based on what we know, what we could predict from the future. But there's such a wide scope of numbers here, from all the way down from JP Morgan giving a rating of $16 back in July. But bear in mind, back in April, the share price was $5. Back in July last year, it was $15. And that's because that Bitcoin, volatility has been a roller coaster for these miners over the last 2 to 3 years. I mean, we had the same problem in 2021 where we saw mining share prices reach ridiculous highs. I remember Mara and Riot share price reached $80 back in 2021. The chances of them reaching $80 again significantly lower now. I mean, although saying if Riot was able to get some deals to fill out the likes of Corsican and Rockdale, we might see that, somewhere towards those prices in the future, a long time away. But we've had so many shareholders say to us, I bought shares in Mara when it was on the way up there, and will I ever get my money back? And the chances are it's a challenge, because these mining companies are growing and then using their at the market offerings to sell more shares, diluting the shares to raise more capital. So even though the share price goes up, it gives them ability to raise more by selling more shares. So you're effectively constantly diluting. And we know that since those days, Riot and Mara have diluted their shares nearly 4 times as many as they had back in 2021. So if they'd have not diluted anything, the share price probably would have still been around $80 for both those companies. But because they've got 4 times as many shares, they're hovering just under the $20 mark.
Now, speaking of Riot, this is where it gets interesting. So based on what we've seen, what we've talked about, this interest in Texas, this bottleneck for available power, the conversion of Bitcoin mining to HPC, now we're going to get into the question of who's next. Riot will kick us off here. They've obviously got some massive facilities located in Texas, Corsicana, and Rockdale. You can see some images on the screen here. What's super interesting to me about Riot is these facilities have massive scale. They're already built out or partially built out, and they've got the available land. And you'll notice in that initial Stargate photo, the amount of space these data centers take is substantial compared to Bitcoin mining. There's a lot of additional equipment, cooling equipment, security that needs to be in place that really doesn't in the position of Bitcoin mining. Riot has already gone out, purchased more additional land, really putting them, I guess, at the forefront of this line.
Yeah, and you can see from those sites there really, really great data centers. We've been lucky to visit the flagship site there, as I said last year. They've also got water at both of those sites there, and the ability to grow that water even bigger, because that's one of the requirements for delivering high performance compute, having the access to water, having the access to fiber, having the access to power. And if you think about that, Riot ticks all those boxes really well. And they've gone out and purchased more and more land to make sure that they're covering all the bases. Now, we know, having been to Corsicana, that there was 75,000 truckfuls of waste land removed from that site to give it the look it has at the moment from that picture there. So we know that they've been through this process before of developing land in readiness to grow large data centers. And you've got 400 megawatts of data centers in Clearview there now. So, by growing another 600 megawatts there, it's well within their remit.
Certainly is. Now, Altman Salon came in and helped them out with their initial feasibility study, but Riot is really focused on building and developing a lot of this stuff in-house. They've obviously purchased ESS Metron. They've got a lot of the internal switchgear, electrical equipment capabilities in-house. They've been hiring up in terms of HPC AI specialists as well. So unlike maybe Bitfarms, who's partnered up with T5 data centers, Riot feels they have the ability to do this or a lot of this in-house.
Yeah, absolutely. And that they have a significant engineering division there, and people have questioned what that engineering division does. Well, we'll know now from moving into this space now how much the ability of that engineering division will provide to Riot and save them from going out to third parties and paying out additional costs. So that will come into their own there. But I really think, if you're looking at companies that are looking in a really strong position, you'd have to put Riot there very close to the top, to be honest with you.
Most definitely. And one of the big differentiators of Riot compared to a Cipher or an IREN, they've obviously got that massive HODL as well. So in terms of balance sheet strength or ability to finance a lot of this, not a problem at all for Riot Platforms. Now, the next one we wanted to focus in on, Soluna Holdings. I mentioned a little bit earlier, it's interesting to kind of compare and contrast some of the smaller players with the bigger ones. Soluna has a lot of sites in Texas as well, potentially not in the same realm or size as what Stargate might be looking for, but in the essence of a rising tide lifts all ships, they've really been brought into the fold here and seen their share price appreciate rapidly with this interest in Texas.
They haven't, and this is probably the reason had a discussion about Soluna on a couple of the podcasts this week already. The share price has been really erratic. It got as high into the $3 range, and bear in mind, a couple of months ago we were asking John about how was he going to manage to keep the share price above $1 before falling foul of the Nasdaq rulings, and he was very confident to say we'll just keep pushing, keep delivering, and we'll get to where we need to get to. And believe you me, it looks like this week's been a sort of a game-changing week for them. There's a lot more interest out there. A lot of people, a lot of analysts that have been looking at some of the big miners are now focusing attention on Soluna. Eric Jackson, who we've had on the channel there, he's been sort of like paying a little bit of attention to Soluna there. Looks at maybe this could be a company that fits his criteria. Is it one of these that's going to 100x? May well do that because they've got a pipeline of 1 gigawatt of power, and they're only utilizing at the moment 75 megawatts is actually energized. They have a couple of projects on the go. Dorothy 2 is close to completion, and also Project Catty has just begun work on that. That's 166 megawatt site there. 2 phases. Phase 1 is going to be all about Bitcoin hosting, but phase 2 looks to be more about HPC AI, and it's sat in Texas. And they have a number of other sites there that can also fulfill the criteria for potential HPC going forward.
They certainly do. And I was going to mention they just broke ground. This is their biggest site ever, 166 megawatts. And if you look down their list of pipeline or power pipeline here, every single one of these future sites is in the state of Texas. So again, right place at the right time for Soluna. Now moving on to Cipher and then eventually IREN here, some of the darlings of the retail space right now. Cipher has a huge presence in Texas, not only their current portfolio, but looking a few years out as well. They've obviously got the Black Pearl site, they've got Barbara Lake. We've talked about Stingray on the channel, but they've got an extensive pipeline post 2026, 2027. We've heard Tyler Page say the people that are responsible for these sites, they're still looking, they're still working, they're still finding new sites. And in the case of Black Pearl and Barbara Lake, a lot of this power is immediately available.
Yeah, both sites are energized now for 300 megawatts. In fact, Black Pearl's already got 150 megawatts aligned to self-mining there. Their hash rate there is over 6.9 exahash there with an efficiency under 20. But Tyler was very clear when I asked him the question at the HC Wainwright conference recently, when I said, actually, he quoted he had 450 megawatts available. And I suggested maybe he has 600 megawatts available because, if the right deal comes in, he could move those miners to other sites and utilize Black Pearl in totality for HPC and Barber Lake as well. And he agreed with my candid question there, and realized that I was able to sort of read a little bit more into the actual potential return on investment for the company.
Most definitely. And we've actually got a clip from Tyler Page at the HC Wainwright conference a few weeks back, really emphasizing the excitement the company has on this sector. So we'll play that clip, then we'll move into IREN.
We have typically the lowest power costs of any company in the space. We've been very focused on securing low power costs in that business with a very efficient fleet. What we have found ourselves in the middle of over the last, I'd say, year or so, and we're not unique up here on this panel, is a position where we were securing and developing large power interconnects for years before that became to be in such high demand because of the rise of large language models, HPC, and the desire for hundreds of megawatts at a single data center. I'd say about a year ago, we really aggressively positioned ourselves on the thesis that we could have very large interconnects in more remote locations, and the traditional HPC data center world would migrate to us.
So as you just heard in that clip, Tyler Page and team have the ability, they have the skill set, and they have the power interconnects required really for one of these large colocation contracts. Now, speaking of large colo contracts, IREN, we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about them. They've got really a diversified approach right now. They're scaling the GPU service or the CSP cloud service provider business model here in Canada. They've also got Childress and of course Sweetwater, both of which happen to be located in Texas.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've seen that the Childress site being developed over the last sort of 2 years. They've delivered 50 exahash of self-mining on that site in very, very quick order, proving that they can build really, good data centers. They've got a significant background in building infrastructure. It wasn't always about Bitcoin mining. Dan and his brother worked for Macquarie on many infrastructure projects. This doesn't come to them as something that's new for them. And if you look at their Bitcoin mining sites, because of the build quality, they're probably able to refurbish those with a little bit of extra funding to get them, effectively ready for, HPC. And what they've decided to do is halt the increase in Bitcoin mining at the Childress site there and build Horizon 1, which is a 50 megawatt IT load. And that's due to be completed by Q4 of 2025. Now, we've had Dan on the podcast twice in recent months, and on both occasions, he suggested that, they expect to have a client for that site there. But he's also conscious the fact that, even though it's a Bitcoin mining site, again, like Tyler, if the right deal comes in, he's prepared to move the miners from Childress and use the whole site there, the whole 750 megawatts for compute, HPC compute, and deliver a project there. Now, as well as Horizon 1, they're also looking to build Horizon 2, which is another 50 megawatt IT load, and site works and procurement are underway. And this is because really they've had strong customer traction, in the months coming up to this, to warrant the fact that they should be thinking more along the lines of build these sites out and they will come effectively. And Dan was also on a show today with Yahoo, fully explaining that the level of demand hasn't changed; it's increased.
We've actually got the clip here, so we'll play that one next, and then we can get into Sweetwater.
Have you seen any mitigation in demand, any slowing down? I mean, are you able to even keep up with capacity, demands on what you guys are trying to do?
No, it's accelerating. And it's a demand and it's a supply game. And we're in this fortunate position where we've got 800 megawatts of data centers already built, which we are backfilling rapidly with the NVIDIA GPUs and replacing these Bitcoin mining ASICs. And the supply side, it is hard to bring online these data centers. We built 600 megawatts in 18 months, but the time to power narrative is real. The choke point is getting grid-connected power. And the benefit of grid-connected power, as we were talking about off air, is that you are connected into a network where the utility guarantees you 24/7 reliable power, and being able to build uptime guarantees and reliable GPU services requires that.
So as you can see direct from Dan, that clip came out today. The bottleneck is real, the demand for power is real, and the value of these megawatts is going up. Now, Sweetwater, we haven't yet talked about. This is really the crown jewel of the IREN portfolio, potentially 2 gigawatts. Why don't you walk us through this one?
Yeah, this is two sites. Sweetwater 1.4 gigawatt, and the energization is due to come online in April 2026. So we're only talking now just a little over 6 months away. Sweetwater 2 is a further 600 megawatts, and that's scheduled for late 2027. These are enormous sites, two gigawatts of sites there. I mean, I emphasize the fact I've been to the largest data center for HPC in Europe, and that was 150 megawatts. Here we've got 2 gigawatts. Now, what IREN are doing here, they're saying that obviously they're in advanced discussions with customers, and they will provide flexibility to develop the sites for all opportunities across the AI infrastructure stack, from powered shells to turnkey co-location to cloud services. So they're very, very much more of a flexible offering here. And, as we've reiterated already in the podcast, they can deliver HPC. They are delivering it at the moment with their CSP contract in Prince George. So here's a company that doesn't, need to wait for the deal to get to the deal it needs. They can go out there and deliver this themselves.
They sure can. And the number that really pops out on this Sweetwater Hub slide for me, the capacity or availability for up to 600,000 next generation GPUs. We talked about the build out, the announcement this week of expanding to 23,000 GPUs in British Columbia. They can support up to 60,000 in that province. This is a factor of 10x when you start talking about Sweetwater. The numbers just get absolutely mind-boggling, and that's exactly why we've seen these analyst price targets just going through the roof. Now, in closing, we wanted to dust off one of Ben Gagnon's comments. This again came from H.C. Wainwright conference last week. It essentially talks about the fact that every megawatt being taken off the market right now increases the value of remaining megawatts on the market. I put out a tweet yesterday along this same vein, talking about the fact a rising tide lifts all ships. It really feels like that's where we're at in the cycle right now. So we'll play the clip from Ben, I guess, validating this statement, and then we can close out.
So what's going to happen here is that you don't actually want to lock yourself into a term sheet with a hyperscaler today. What you want to do is you want to execute. You want to bring that closer and closer and closer to the point where the customers are getting increasingly more desperate and they're willing to pay increasingly higher prices. That's how you lock in higher margins and higher revenues. And so this is exactly aligned with how we view the market.
Yeah, and it's interesting. We've been listening to Ben, over the last 5 or 6 years, and he can articulate this probably better than anybody else out there at the moment. And he sees this positivity in terms of the location. Remember, Bitfarms Panther site is located and surrounded by about 8 hyperscalers. So he feels fairly confident that they're going to be able to engage and deliver a HP service at that site.
And of course, Bitfarms operates in the PJM market, not Texas, but the fact remains that the more hyperscalers that come into these markets, the more desirable they become. So with that being said, in closing, we don't necessarily know who's going to get the next colocation or hyperscaler deal, but it seems at this point it really doesn't matter. Every company that signs one of these deals further validates the rest of the industry. It appears there's more than enough megawatt demand to go around, and the rates per megawatt continue to go up. With that being said, I'll hand it back to you to close, Anthony, but an exciting time to be in the Bitcoin mining / HPC sector.
Yeah, it certainly is. And you can understand now why the likes of CleanSpark have decided to turn their strategy towards HPC, albeit, a little bit late, but maybe they have the sites there that can be refurbished and deliver HPC as quickly as some of the miners who've decided, in prior times. Time will tell, but it's a really good space to be in at the moment. I hope you're all, enjoying the podcast and enjoying the fact that these share prices have been rallying significantly over the last few months.
And don't forget to take some profits along the way, you guys. If you're having a good day in the market, hit the like button. Feel free to subscribe. Let us know in the comment section below who your money is on in terms of the next large colocation contract. We'd love to hear your opinion. We'll see you back here tomorrow.